Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present in this webinar. I'm Michael Humber. I'm an assistant research professor at the University of Maryland and the data lead of the NASA Harvest Consortium. I'm presenting on behalf of many collaborators, but I'd especially like to thank Dr. Hannah Kerner, Blake Munchell, and Dr. Inbal Bekarisha for their contributions to this presentation. Our project is titled Mapping National Scale Agricultural Practices, wherein we aim to monitor cropland and crop types in several countries around the world. In this work, we're looking at the Centu Agri system for generating agricultural products, including vegetation indices, cropped area maps, crop type maps, and crop phenology indicators. It's a turnkey system used in several countries around the world, and the implementation that we're using is based on a version that was provided to us by GEO-AWS. Our goal here is to understand how the system performs both generally, but also with respect to how it operates in the Amazon Web Services cloud. One of the main types of questions that we're trying to tackle here is when we're dealing with the diversity of landscapes that we see in the right-hand picture with different crop types and different agricultural practices, how well does a one-size-fits-all system handle these differences in landscapes, and what are the costs, benefits, and pitfalls of doing so? In terms of our proposed solution, our first and foremost challenge here is collecting field data because the field data is needed to train and validate the image classifications. We are working in several countries with local collaborators in Argentina, like the Buenos Aires Grains Exchange, Swiss Re in Kenya, Lutheran World Relief, Plant Village, and National Agricultural Ministries. We plan to use this field data to both train and validate the outputs of Centu Agri and compare those results to in-house products that we've created under the NASA Harvest program. In doing so, we plan to document, summarize costs, and present any usage issues and a summary of the efficacy of the results throughout this project. In the end, we'll release the maps and the field data under the Creative Commons license that will be available for everyone to use in the Harvest portal. I mentioned that the first challenge that we have to face here is field data collection, and as many of you can all probably assume, UMD and its partners have been unable to collect any field data in recent months due to the pandemic. Instead, we focused our efforts on digitizing data that we've collected in past campaigns, and this involves converting a lot of point types of data collected from windshield surveys into polygons. So this is a high effort activity that involves digitizing and actually drawing the boundaries of the fields that are on either side of the road when the collector identified the left or the right hand side as being a certain crop. To date, we've actually identified over 19,000 fields. Most of those fields were from 2018, but we do have a pretty well distributed sample between 2016 and 2020 and in several countries around the world. But I should note here that this 19,000 field boundaries number can be a little bit misleading because a lot of these field boundaries are really just the boundary of the field. They don't contain the crop type. So we feel that while this is very useful data for doing a sort of image segmentation, its utility for classifications really depends on what it is you're trying to do. So because of that, we are also currently exploring other ways of getting field data, and this includes looking at solutions like using the Radiant Earth ML Hub data or data that's going to be collected under the Lacuna Fund in the next few months. In doing so, we're preparing ourselves for a big field data campaign that's going to take place once field travel is possible once again. So that means that we're developing forms for use with field data collection apps like the Survey 123 and ODK apps that are available from Esri and ODK respectively. And this is also data that will be released publicly under NASA Harvest as well. I should also note here that we're currently working on a program with the Buenos Aires Grains Exchange in Argentina that will aim to engage students to collect field data as part of their studies in an educational series on agricultural monitoring that will expose them to new types of technology for agricultural monitoring. For our comparison purposes, we do have a lot of work going on with how do we maximize the utility of those limited field data sets that we have, given that we're not able to go out to the field and collect data, at least for the near future. The way that we've been working on this, and this is work that's being done by Dr. Hannah Kerner, who's an expert in machine learning for agriculture, is to take this approach where she's using deep learning using long short-term memory neural networks and being able to use transfer learning to take data from areas that are not necessarily near or adjacent to our study area and use those to improve the classifications in the study area itself. And in doing so, they're able to generate cropland maps both within and at the end of the season. So again, this is the benchmark and the data set we're going to use to compare this Centu Agri results against. And because this code is available on GitHub and free for anyone to use, we think that it's a reasonable comparison, even though the system itself is not quite as turnkey as the Centu Agri system. Using these methods, Dr. Kerner and her team have put together image classifications using these sparse training data sets for several countries, including Kenya, and that's the map that we see here on the right, with especially not only nationally, but especially with a focus in Busia County. They've also created maps for Sudan, Rwanda, Ethiopia, several provinces in China, and Brazil. So here we see an example of the map that was created in one of the provinces in China. I'm also leaving out here previous work that we've done with the Buenos Aires Grains Exchange in creating winter crop classifications that we can use as a comparison benchmark as well. In terms of challenges and benchmarks, again, the biggest challenge that we have so far is that it hasn't really been possible for us to do field data collection. This is due not only to local travel restrictions like we see in Argentina, where field collectors are unable to move between provinces, but also restrictions from our university as well, and just general health concerns that prevent us from going out to the field. We found that the data cleaning process is more time consuming than we even anticipated. On the right hand side here, you see the results of a windshield survey. So those dots in orange, and the first letter following the number corresponds to the crop type that was on the left, and the second the crop type that was on the right. We're finding that we have to augment these field data sets with a very high resolution imagery like Planet in order to find the boundaries of the fields and attribute those left and right labels to an actual two-dimensional space on the ground. In terms of working with Amazon Web Services, we know that the learning curve can be quite steep for new team members. In order for us to efficiently use the resources, this means that we have to either spend a lot of time training new members or provide significant oversight in order to prevent any sort of billing issues, overages from leaving instances on. And we've also found that the lift and shift model doesn't really translate well for computationally intensive tasks. So one of the things that we would normally do is like to iterate over these runs and maybe work our way from 70 to 80, 90 up to 100% of our goal in terms of study area. But what we're finding is that because each one of these runs in such a long running task costs a non-negligible amount of money, we really have to kind of hold our data until we are sure that we're able to run the entire thing. Otherwise, we incur costs along the way, and we really just have to run the big classification when we feel like we're ready for it. That said, it is not really possible for us to run classifications like we saw with those long short-term memory neural networks because we don't have the resources on premises to deploy in order to run those classifications. So while we do have that cost associated with running these models, this is really the only way that we can actually run these at scale. And that's been a major benefit of Amazon Web Services for us. So our next steps, again, we're sort of held back a little bit here by the pandemic, but we really need to expand our field observations, and this is to make sure that we're properly training the Send Agri system in order to do a fair comparison. We also are planning then to run and benchmark the system against our existing classifications. The impact that we expect to see here is that this work will first and foremost help potential users of the system understand the costs and benefits of Send2Agri as a system being run in the cloud. And as secondary benefits, we do plan to release all of our data to the public. So there will be tens of thousands in this case, field polygon boundaries and crop type locations for everyone to use, as well as the maps that will be released publicly, as well as made available, of course, to our collaborators and stakeholders. So with that, I thank you all, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have about this project.